So, we have the graveyard shift, so thank you for staying with us. We're competing with AI, which is in the other room, and we are very conscious that it's us holding you back from drinks, which will happen after this. But let's have a good conversation. We're quite an intimate audience, so we do welcome questions from the audience. I know there's a burning one on second row there. No pressure. But first, let's get a little introduction to the wonderful panel up here. So, Roland, let's start with you.
My name's Ronald Egelman. I do development for Wyndham Hotels and Resorts.
Navneet?
My name is Navneet Bali. I run a business called Live-In Hotels, which is a hybrid hotel, hostel, as well as co-living, co-working space in one building. So a flexible environment. We plan to grow this business across Europe and the UK and have about 15 hotels over the next 4 or 5 years. With your help, of course.
Fantastic. Thomas, thank you.
Thomas Emanuel, currently independent and doing some advisory work.
Fantastic. And last but not least, William.
Everyone tells me that. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Will Kirkpatrick. I'm head of hotels and extended stay at Newmark.
Great. So I have a sort of a statement question to each of you. So let's start with you, Ronald. Launching a new extended stay brand is harder today than it was 5 years ago.
Probably correct, and you're definitely not going to be the first, right? We're now getting to a stage where a lot of the larger hotel brands have launched extended stay brands, and there are also quite a number of regionally or nationally successful extended stay brands that are growing up in the individual countries. Would I start an extended stay brand, Wyndham, in Europe at the moment? Not sure. You know how we saw this curve at one of the sections where they said at 1 you're operationally really successful, and then you'll be operational again at about 1,000. At some point at the bottom of this curve, these companies that are currently starting up are going to think, actually what we need here is we need some scale, we need some help and some expertise. That's the point where I'd like to have a conversation.
Fantastic, and we'll return to that. Thomas, in one word, what trend in the extended stay space is being underestimated right now?
One word. Convergence.
And we'll talk about that too.
Yeah.
William, extended stay will outperform traditional hotels in investor returns over the next decade.
Well, I think we already do that today, and we'll definitely do it more in the future.
So trend that will continue.
Absolutely.
And Navneet, hybrid hospitality is more of a mindset than a model. Yes or no?
Yes.
Great, and we'll pick up on that as well. So let's first start with sort of setting the stage, bigger picture. So why is the extended stay and hybrid hospitality space gaining such attention from investors right now, and why should those outside take note? So William, I'll throw that over to you.
I mean, if you look at the sector at the minute, it's what I call the darling sector. And what I mean by that is, if you look at that business model, how many other businesses do you know that produce that level of profit conversion? So one, you've got an incredibly strong profit conversion. And then number two is obviously there's a material undersupply in the market today. So, and then that their demand is growing as well. And then fourthly as well, that, you know, if you look at the ability, I'll give an example. We're working on a 5-star hotel at the minute, and there's been a dispute, and various numbers of the chefs have all walked out. Whereas with extended stay product, you don't have that issue. So it is just, genuinely I'm saying this, it is one of the best sectors at the minute, and that's the reason why we're seeing so much demand for the sector at the minute.
Fantastic. Thomas, anything you want to add on to that in terms of why it's such at the forefront of investors right now?
I mean, I think Will captures it quite nicely, but if you think about the data, and I think maybe we'll come on to that a bit more later, you know, it is a high-performing sector. It does well, and the cost base is significantly lower. So as Will said, that profit margin is where it's at. So that's why I think, the darling sector you called it, I think it's a great summary, really.
And Navneet, next question to you, because obviously live-in product, that kind of sits at the intersection of everything hybrid. So tell us a little bit more about that model and how sort of all the sort of different elements work together within live-in.
Yeah, so the idea is that you have one building, if you like, and I love that phrase which I saw the other day, so in the morning, hypermixity. Was that the word?
Yeah,
was
hypermixity.
Is
yeah.
the new normal. I hadn't heard that word before, but we come up with new words all the time, don't we?
We do.
So hybrid is a word, I take credit for using it for the first time in the hotel industry. And nobody's challenged me on that. But actually, when I was working in my previous job, which was a hotel hostel business called Meininger, and everybody said, is it a hostel, is it a hotel? And I said, well, there was a lot of confusion about that. And I used to drive a hybrid car at that time, Priya. So I said, why not call it hybrid? So we called it hybrid, and everybody was very happy because it looks like. And actually the main reason was, and I'll sort of digress a little bit, investors didn't like the word hostels. They still don't, I think. But so that actually helped in terms of communicating something which was different, like a hotel product, but actually has certain attributes. And why I mention that is because it has attributes of this flexibility. It's flexible for the customer because he can choose what he wants. He can choose a bed to stay, sleep in, or a room. Both are there. So live-in has both attributes: shared rooms as well as private rooms. And also, then you have the community side, the public spaces where you allow co-working, and also an element of extended stay, which is what we actually use, and you can call it co-living, so that you can have longer staying people. So you're able to be flexible, both in terms of the hardware, the room product, if you like, the product itself, also allows you to be flexible the way you sell the product in the market, so both ways. So you're able to get people at different times of the, so if the same room, for example, we have a room which is flexible from a hardware perspective, it's got a double bed or a twin bed with a pair of bunk beds. But they're flex beds, they go into the wall. So you can sell that room to a businessman as a regular double room, which you would get in a budget hotel like a Premier Inn. But you could also sell it as 4 beds to 4 individuals who don't know each other, which is a hostel dorm. It could also be sold to a family of 4 or 3. It could also be sold to a group of 4 people who know each other, going for a hen party or a stag night, or a school group.
So it plays to a lot of different occasions.
Yeah, so the flexibility of the product, the hardware, as I call it, plus the flexibility of the way you operate it. And that's the mindset issue.
So I hear the word flexibility a lot, and I guess that's maybe a question to you, Thomas, next, and then we'll come to you, Ronald. In terms of sort of times of market stress this sector has, how much has it outperformed? Is the flexibility the key driver behind it, or what are the key drivers, and what can other sector investors learn from it?
Sure. I mean, if we think back to the last period of real stress for the industry, COVID, right? And I remember speaking a lot at the time about how extended stay service departments were outperforming the traditional hotels significantly. Now, of course, it was an extreme situation, but having the flexibility around having a lounge area in many cases, or a kitchenette, the more self-contained aspects, I think, really played into it, particularly when there was social distancing and restaurants weren't open and so forth. So we saw the sector do very well then. But if we think about it in normal times as well, and just look at that extended stay service department sector versus your standard hotel, in the UK, there's about a 3 percentage point premium from an occupancy perspective. And then if you look at average rates, it's about a £30 premium on your average hotel. Now, you have to dive down and look at that in a little bit more detail as to why. And I think there's really kind of three key factors, four key factors really, if you consider, of course, there's the demand coming in, but then you have to look at the maturity of the sector as well. So it's, and when I think about those 3, size, obviously you're paying a premium for size. Of course, a 1 bed or even a studio, 2 bed, etc., you're going to pay more than a hotel room. Class as well. This is still very much, I think what Navneet's doing is interesting and kind of unique in many ways, and what he's done previously as well. Because if you look at the the service department extended stay, it's generally upper mid-scale and above. So that, again, is going to point to more the premium. Obviously, if you're staying for longer, a lot of people are going to want a few more creature comfort, so you're not looking at that budget economy sector so much. And then location, it's really still, and Will touched on supply, it's still quite an immature sector in some respects. It's more developed in a London, Birmingham, Manchester, Edinburgh, Glasgow, etc. But you don't see these properties cropping up in secondary and tertiary cities at the moment. So I think there are lots of reasons as to why we see actually that exceptional performance when you compare to the hotels that we know, love and work with day in, day out.
And we'll come back to the sort of future outlook and what locations should be talking about. But Ronald, I want to throw the next question to you. Obviously, Wyndham plays in the sort of franchising space. So how does the extended stay model fit into your overall business model?
At the moment, globally, in the last 5 years, we launched 2 extended stay brands. One is called Echo Suites, which is only available in the US at the moment. That is actually more at the economy end. It's doing really well. We're up to about 250 of those in the pipeline, which is phenomenal in our books. It works well because the US is a very single market. Construction costs are known, land price is reasonable. We can present investors with a full pack saying, this is what your hotel should look like. These are the drawings. These are the people you can talk to for preferential rate on finance. These are the numbers. This is the expected return on your product in this state. All you have to do as a franchisee is actually go and build it, and we know it works. Problem with that model is you try and replicate that in Paris, London, Berlin, Madrid. Yeah, we're talking like they're on 30 square meters minimum room sizes for a what they call more economy budget. That sort of stuff doesn't work here, right? You can do the same sort of concept, but realistically, if you're doing this in a grade A city in Europe, you're looking at 16 square meters that you have to achieve the exact same thing in. So the landscape is different, planning permissions are different, regulations are different. And when you look at extended stay and people are staying for like 3 to 6 months, they have different expectations than your hotel client who comes in for 1 or 2 days. And those requests are actually a lot more local than they would be for a hotel room. So an extended stay customer for us somewhere in Saudi Arabia has very different requirement than someone in central Paris. And the internal struggle I'm having at the moment is how do I find a homogeneous product that fits all that? And the answer might be it doesn't exist yet and maybe you need to do something more localized. So Echo Suites US works really well. Second concept we have is Waterwalk. Now the interesting thing about Waterwalk is it does stay, but it also does living. So on the one hand, we have products where you can have your extended stay. This is a more upmarket product, fully furnished, all the amenities that you would look for. But for stays over 90 days, we give you the option to take an empty apartment. And you can bring your own furniture and make it more like a place that you actually live in. Conceptually, I think it's really clever. We obviously have faith that we can grow this. We're doing this together with them. It's more a co-branding than a brand that we launched ourselves. And as an industry, you know, operational real estate, it gets a lot closer to build to rent, co-living. You know, we all talk about extended stay, apart hotels, build to rent. Everything we're doing is basically moving the whole real estate industry into something more based on experience and service. The service element is important to the next generation of people who are going to be living in these places. And that's where, as a brand company, we feel we can add value.
You talked about that, and I think someone mentioned convergence when we first did intro. So I think, but William, I'll ask you this question. So a lot of blurred lines between this co-living, service department, extended stay. So are we heading towards a sort of convergence, or do we still need to have that distinction because it remains important for the investor base?
From my side of the table, I think you do need a distinction still, because our planning system is still, certainly in the UK, still quite rigid. So actually there's a problem with that. But coming back to one of your comments you made earlier, what we did see during COVID was if you had, let's say, a service department, you could actually let out on longer periods. So actually that became much more robust product than a hotel, because actually you're able to pivot towards longer stays. So, from an investor's viewpoint, the extended stay model is a lot more robust, a lot more secure, because you've got this dual action point where you can actually pivot towards a hotel market, or you can pivot towards extended stay or service department market. So that's the exciting bit about that. So I think we still need to keep those separate, and I think investors, if you look at pension funds and so on, they still need to see those being separated. And I think they're different markets as well. I know in America, you talk about corporate housing and so on, and how they split up that way, but the UK, the UK is such a smaller country, I do apologise, and the same with Europe as well.
Thomas, was it you who said convergence? But you meant it from this respect, or you meant it more as sort of as a wider trend in the industry?
I meant it more as a wider trend, I think, because very much around the blurring between hospitality, the service apartment concept, co-living, co-working, residential, etc., and that word hypermixity, which was used this morning. And I think it's, understanding that extended stay is not necessarily just a hotel with longer stays now. It's about trying to, I think in many cases, provide a flexible, attractive environment that is going to then appeal to the digital nomads and the long stay corporates and the relocating professionals and just people on leisure trips who want a little bit more autonomy as well. And I think if there is that convergence that happens, in many cases they're going to be in a good position to attract that demand and benefit from that asset, and ultimately that's where we're seeing product innovation as well. Navneet's touched on that. So I think it's it's not just about focusing on a property which has longer stays necessarily, and that seemed to me when I was thinking about it a trend that is becoming more and more prevalent, and we heard about that again. That was echoed this morning.
Absolutely. I want to go sort of look then to the future. There's a lot of growth. Where is the growth coming from in terms of locations? What are we looking at? I'll start with you, William, in terms of where do you see the most sort of, where's the pipeline taking us?
The reason I'm looking at you is pipeline is a very difficult word to use at the minute, actually, because obviously our build costs and our development finance costs are really throttling any ability to look at stuff. So, I mean, a lot of the kit that we're looking at the minute is mostly conversions, because we can't afford to build anything up from the ground. So therefore that leads you straight into city centres. There's certain city centres which there's a good amount of stock, but we are still undersupplied. In places like Manchester, if you have branded kit there, that we have seen some numbers coming through quite strongly. So to answer your question, it's still being city centres. We still haven't moved to this. I remember years ago when we started working with Seco, roughly about 12 years ago, Seco had these former houses and proper service departments out in the middle of Reading and Faversham and things like that. They're weird locations. And I think we haven't seen that coming through yet. And you're talking there about trying to build purpose-built product. In the UK, we can't do that in Europe as well. So unless you're going to start moving out of city centres. So all the stuff, we need to see some sort of divergence, some moving away from this city centre-based product. And I think what some people have looked at quite cleverly is, look, where's the corporate accounts going? Where's BMW? Where's PwC? Where's all those corporate accounts? And some of them don't have, like Milton Keynes is a good example. You've got these kind of back-of-house locations, which we should be looking at those sort of locations, and all of a sudden then you can build a purpose-built building in Milton Keynes.
And Navneet, where are you looking with Livin? Where are you placing your bets in terms of future growth?
So we basically focus on urban centres. Though I think there's a model which you could do, leisure resorts, and some of the brands have tried that. We are very much focused on urban areas. It doesn't have to be city centre. For example, in Paris, it could be on the peripherique, as long as you're close to the metro station. So access to public transportation is key. And in fact, city centre is probably not ideal in some ways. particularly in a city like Paris or even London, is too costly in terms of rent per square meter, if you like, because our customers are not that sensitive to the location. Their costs, they're obviously looking at affordability. So it's actually access to the center that's important, access to where they want to go, to the museums, to the nightclubs, to the leisure destinations, or to business locations. So it's the access to public transportation, I think, is the key for us.
So the way to get around. And Ronald, you said the Echo Suites, 250 right now in the US. And so I didn't catch, sorry, Waterwalk is also US?
Also US.
And any other growth plans for other geographies, or are you trying to get these models right first?
Absolutely massive growth plans, none that I can talk to you about.
Ooh, so we'll leave that for.
But look, we think it's a really interesting market. We want to be in this market. We haven't found the right solution yet, but we're working hard on finding that solution. And with regards to use of space, and I know we've talked about this in the past, but people are still looking at awkward office buildings because wide floor spaces make it a lot easier to put an apartment in there than lots of tiny hotel rooms, because you've only got that many windows and you cannot really make your hotel rooms all that long and thin. So we still have people looking at even in London, city centre, office block locations, and because they can't really make it work as an office anymore because there isn't a demand, it's sort of more the design of the building that forces them towards extended stay than anything else.
Now, slightly maybe a question from left field, but usually when you're talking about buildings, when it's converting, you have to also deal with sort of basement spaces. So do you at all look at, the apartment extended stay on the levels above ground and windowless rooms in the bottom? Is that something that...
Look, welcome to central London, where your average room size in a couple of years is going to be about 10 square meters, and you'll probably have to pay extra for a window.
So is that a thing?
That is a thing. That is open, up and running. Yeah, this is not new.
And growing.
And growing, and people are paying for it. I see people asking a premium for the rooms with no windows because they're really quiet.
Which in a place like London is a great thing.
You're absolutely spot on. So there's a funny story about, hopefully Tom Walsh doesn't mind me saying, Stay City. And years ago he was trying to, when he's developing the one in the Strand, the Wildland Strand, and in that there, he's got a number of rooms there with no windows. And so he deliberately booked himself into the Z Hotels because they've got windowless rooms. And I think it took him 4 attempts because every time he went there, they kept upgrading him. And he deliberately wanted to stay in one room without that. So the Strand, the Wildland Strand, has got product underground.
Yeah.
And actually, if you look at the ADR difference between that and a room with a window, it's sub 10%. Because actually, coming back to your point there, those people who are turning up who are like sleepers, the sound installation is absolutely amazing. You couldn't hear a pin drop. And also, if you're going in there for one night, it's absolutely fine. You obviously wouldn't stay there for a week or for longer, but it does very well. So the ADR on that is not that much. But I think what most operators are saying is they will look at a percentage, but that percentage has got to be some people's 10, sub 5% of total stock.
And it's got to be a good location.
Absolutely,
right?
prime.
Because Milton Keynes, lovely place, but I'm not going to Milton Keynes.
Well, you love Roundel.
To be in a windowless.
You're right.
Obviously, for extended stay, staying in a basement room with no windows, I'm sure there's some kind of a problem. But for transient,
Yeah, that's called prison.
exactly.
But you
for
pay for it.
the transient model, in our sector, particularly in the hostel hotel sector, it's very, very prevalent. Except if you're not allowed. Like in Germany, you can't do it legally. You can't have a windowless room. But I was at the new Scandic Go, which is a new brand Scandic has in Stockholm, and I thought the room actually had a window, but actually it wasn't without a window. They designed it so beautifully with the light behind the curtain. It didn't feel like that. Of course, it was winter, so everything is dark anyway.
Doesn't
so
matter.
it doesn't really matter. But actually, you can design them quite well,
Yeah.
and I think it goes well. In the case of the hostel sector, we have pods. I know Generator, which is another brand in our sector, took out their breakfast room in the basement in Amsterdam and put in pods. And the return on investment is very high, they tell me, on that.
But I think as we see more brands coming out, so if you look at Numa, they will have a number of windowless rooms. You turn up and there's no one there. And I think, our sector's still quite young. And I think as we start seeing that sector, let's say if we take apart hotels, at least the service apartment side, as we start seeing more brands coming in, then all of a sudden you'll have the super, the budget brand, the mid-scale brand, then the upscale brand. And I think that's the point where I see the sector becomes more relevant and more real. Because, if you go and stay in a Numa, it works fine, but actually, would I put my mother up in that? Definitely not. But so actually, I think we just need...
And why not?
Well, that's a different conversation.
It's a different. She doesn't like me. That's why.
Is it?
But and also if something goes wrong, there's no one there. So we act for the Bedford Estate, and we've done the first leasing in London or advised on, I should say, and we deliberately required that there be full-time staff in there because we didn't want a building with no receptionist in there because we're Tottenham Court Road near Soho. You work out the rest. So look, I think there will be, and I think as the extended stay sector grows, we'll grow out, and then some brands will merge together, and then we'll get a more mature market. And I think that's how I see it coming through.
We have a couple of minutes left. Are there any burning questions from the audience?
Supportive.
Oh, of course.
Please ignore them.
Thank you. Andrew Hunter from TFE Hotels. Adina is the brand that we'd be probably best known for here. Extended stay, I think, is a really integral part of any major city, and it's a really important element of the infrastructure of that city. And yet it seems that almost nowhere do the planners fully appreciate what it is and understand how it needs to be integrated into the city. So I suppose I have two questions. Number one is there something we as an industry should be doing to try to promote and actually get a better understanding? And obviously we can maybe only deal with one country at a time, but generally I think it's an important point. And secondly, do you actually think there should be a real differentiation? Because certainly from our perspective, we have to go in the UK for a C1 use. We can't really do anything else. So should we have a differentiation between a apart hotel and normal hotels in a planning sense?
I think a lot of the LPAs, local planning authorities, are nervous about apart. So when I say, just for clarity, so when you say extended stay, what I mean by that is apart hotels and service departments under that umbrella. They are very, very nervous about people using that as a back door to get residential use, if that makes sense. So as you saw during COVID, a lot of service departments, sorry, not a lot, a number of service departments were going ASTs because obviously the corporate demand wasn't there. So our job, we write a lot of papers explaining to the LPA, look, actually, this is a genuine operator. Have got a long trading history in terms of being a part hotel or extended stay or whatever they are. And I think that's one of the biggest concerns. They just see there's been a number of people trying to use that as a way of getting around paying SIL and affordable housing and so on. So I think that's the biggest bit. But once they get comfortable with that, thereafter, normally we're quite fine. They do get a bit nervous about some of the micro units that you mentioned earlier there. So about obviously room sizes. So if they're very, very small. So let's say if you are going down to 15 square meters, you can just see them getting a bit twitchy at that point. So, and then on your second question, absolutely no, because the gentleman sitting behind you who's a fund manager wouldn't like that, because actually if you start separating that out, all of a sudden, then you have to get planning permission to move you around. So actually having that flexibility at the minute that, let's say if an apart hotel doesn't work out, I can tomorrow convert that back into hotel and vice versa. So actually having that flexibility, I think part of it is just educating the LPAs, so local planning authorities, because once they understand it, then they get it, if that makes sense. And one of the way I explain it to them, I say, look, if you're traveling, let's say, with a health condition, or you're traveling with a child, or you're coming with, let's say, I'll give you an example, with Cambridge University, they have lots of colleges coming over from India and so on. People want to cook their own food. They don't necessarily want to eat out in a restaurant every night. So that once they understand it, they get it, if that makes sense. It's just an education piece, as you rightly say.
Got time for one more? No more? I will ask the closing question. Of course, Andrew, go for it.
It's your conference.
I think. Am I wired up?
Yep.
Yeah, I am. So in the last panel, Charlie Gaynor from Arc Living talked about yield compression going on in co-living. And I just wondered what the panel's thoughts were in terms of, you've talked, in terms of the labour cost piece, makes it particularly appealing, I think, in terms of a sector. Can you see this the yields compress in this sector lower than regular hotels?
I mean, whenever I've been to conferences with people like CBRE, valuers have talked about it, they do say that it's difficult sometimes because you don't have benchmarks for this hybrid approach, but then they try to do a weighted average yield, if you like, of the longer stays and the transient to come up with a blended yield. So I would say the answer is yes, but then there has to be education, if you like, and probably more benchmarking coming in based on actual deals and, you know, sales and so on and so forth. Probably that's quite thin at the moment. Yeah. So it's a bit of a, you know, taking CBRE's word or
Newmark's.
Dare I say JLL?
Look, I think it comes back to what I said at the very beginning. You know, if you've got a business model, very simplistically, that has a very high profit conversion, it can be run from the head office there, it doesn't need an exclusive skill set on site. There's a shortage of product at the minute and demand's growing. You know, so if you look at that in terms of you're valuing a business model, I mean, what more do you need actually? That to me is a very strong product. Come back to your point earlier, there's just not enough transactions of good kit. Because if you've got good kit in the sector, generally people aren't selling it. So anything we are seeing that sells generally has maybe some AM issue to it or opportunity, depending on your language. We at Newmark and other companies do it as well. We actually have sat down the top 5 firms together to discuss this. We do also look at it on a per habitable room basis. So let's say if you've got a service department, what we would do is we'd look at, let's say it's a 1-bedroom one, we'd look at that as 2 habitable rooms, and then we'd compare that with the hotel market. So it will make sure that we're trying to look at that. So we would sharpen the yield. The problem is there's just not enough evidence out there. But any valuer will get the point that what I've just said, the 4 fundamentals that I mentioned at the very beginning. You have to apply a better yield than, let's say, to a tired 3, let's say, Holiday Inn or some equivalent of in some city. So there has to be, the question is how big is that gap? We are seeing more people interested in the sector, certainly, so there will be more yield compression down, but quantifying is a problem.
I know in the student hotel, I mean the TSH, when they were looking at that, because it's not co-living exactly, but it's like PBSA and hotel combination. I think, again, it was a blended yield that you look at, but they didn't sell or haven't sold yet, so we don't know what actually the deal valuation might have been. But there have been deals, of course, investors going in, like I think Singapore government, GIC, etc. So my guess is they took a view on the yield.
I think one of the points, exactly, and I think also the other point is, if you look at the value per key, they get quite exciting. So if I've got, let's say, apart hotels doing profit conversion of, let's say, 45% profit conversion NOI, and you're applying, let's say, yield to that, and all, so it's throwing up very meaty numbers. So at that point, people do get a bit nervous and go, gosh, is that the right answer? And that's why I think that per habitable room basis does give it a bit of comfort in terms of saying, well, actually, if you look on a per habitable room basis, all of a sudden it doesn't look so scary. But I think that's where some people do get a bit scared when they look at it, just because these super profit conversion, not super profit conversion, but strong profit conversions. We do the same. So Whitbread, for example, in Premier Inn, some of their sites have what we call super profit conversions, and you do have to look at them and go, is that the right yield? Because, you know, that profit conversion is sitting very, very high.
Thank you. And just because we're very much out of time, very, very quick answers to my last question. We'll start with you, Thomas. If the next 5 years go exactly as you'd hope, what transformational headline would you want to see in a leading investor publication about this sector?
Extended stay emerges as a core part of any mixed real estate portfolio.
William?
The extended stay is the top sector to invest in.
Good. Navneet?
Hybrid hotels give you the highest EBITDA per square meter.
Ronald, take us away.
All those headlines followed by Wyndham.
Thank you to the panel.
Good one.